So today I'll be giving out my thoughts on Daniel Jones through 2 years. I made a similar video for Gettleman a week ago. Of course, a GM and a quarterback is much different, but this time I made like a graphic basically of the pros and cons, or the good and the bad, and put that in there, wrote like a whole note about him at the end of it, talking about what we need in the future and things like that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. There was news today about Deshaun Watson, possibly seeking a trade, and I'm one of the people, if you follow me on Twitter, I would definitely be all for that. I do want to give Daniel Jones year 3, but Deshaun Watson is an elite quarterback at 25 years old. My hypothetical trade, if you will, was like this year's first, a third this year, a second next year, and Daniel Jones. You can agree with that one, disagree. Some people said it's a good trade. Some people said it's a terrible trade. So I've gotten all types of feedback on that, but it is what it is. Anyway, so let me know in the comments how you feel about Daniel Jones entering year 3. Are you confident, not confident? Is he going to be great? Is he going to be trash? Let me know how you feel. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and let's get into it. All right, so in this video, we're not going to look at the stats too much because really anyone can look at stats and make your own interpretation. What I'm doing is like more of the eyeball test. What do I see? Doesn't mean I'm right. I'm definitely wrong a lot. But at the same time, I feel like when you watch a guy for so long, you can kind of... I know Daniel Jones can improve, of course, but you can kind of get a gauge of what player you think he'll be in the future and kind of project him of what you think he can be in the future. So that's kind of what I went off of here. There might be some stats, but let's get into it. So the good, his speed and rushing. I mean, as a straight line runner, we know Daniel Jones is very fast. He's not the most agile guy. He's not elusive. He's not going to make people miss very often. I've seen it before, but not very often. He's not Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray in that regard, but he is very fast, a straight line runner, so that's definitely a part of his game that defense has to respect. He's had improvements with ball security. I've noticed it since week 1 against Pittsburgh. We saw 2 hands on the ball, firmly grasping it, and there were some blips this year and some not so good moments of that. The Marcus Golden play against the Cardinals comes to mind. There were a couple of others where he was, had I guess a game or two where the ball security was not good, but compared to last year, I think he cut the fumbles in half maybe. The fumbles lost was not that bad at all. So, I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. So, it was definitely an improvement, compared to last year. He was better with the interceptions his final 6 games. So, yeah, his touchdown-to-interception ratio was not pretty at most points in the year. It didn't finish that great. As I said, I'm trying to stay away from stats, but, he had, like, more interceptions than touchdowns for, I feel like, a good amount of the year, like, at least halfway through it. So, that has to get better next year, of course. His toughness... you can think Daniel Jones is not good or good. You can't deny how tough he is. I love that about a quarterback, so I will always respect him for that. No off-the-field issues. We saw a guy in Dwayne Haskins have plenty of those, and there's other quarterbacks sometimes that have those issues, but, Haskins is the easy target because he was a guy that many Giants fans wanted over Daniel Jones. So that's one where you're like, okay, well, we avoided someone there with a, I don't want to say a bad personality, but Dwayne Haskins is clearly very immature compared to someone like Daniel Jones. So I do like the no off-field issues. There was that one thing about Daniel Jones, like at some, I don't know if it was a party or what, like partying or something without a mask, and Saquon was there with a scooter or something after his ACL. So that wasn't the best look. But other than that, I have not heard anything bad. There was the one party last year with the flip cup and Eli Manning. That's all good. I'm not worried about that type of stuff. So he's one of the best deep ball passers in the NFL, I think, based on a minimum of 500 attempts. Just overall passing, of course, not just deep balls, but for 500 passing attempts or more overall, he was the most accurate quarterback of 20 yards or more. So sometimes your eyeballs will tell you otherwise. I've seen plenty of Daniel Jones misses on deep balls, but you're not going to be 100%. I get that. But the numbers will tell you that, based on his deep ball of 20-plus yards, he is one of the, and possibly the, based on the numbers last year, most accurate quarterback on deep ball passing. Now, you guys know I'm not the biggest fan of his arm strength. We'll get to that later. But when you can accurately place a ball and give your receivers a chance to get it, that definitely says a lot about you as a quarterback, so it's a positive. But the problem was that, and this is probably more of a Jason Garrett issue and maybe offensive line, he was 21st in attempts on deep balls. So when you're first in accuracy but 21st in the attempts, it's obviously not a good thing. So you want to see more of that going forward next year, hopefully, when there's a better offensive line, hopefully a wide receiver one. That'll get those numbers looking even better, hopefully. He's an efficient passer without pressure. So that was a PFF stat I brought up a couple weeks ago. His numbers without pressure on him are amazing. That's not a concern at all. So when you see that, that's definitely great to see. When he's facing pressure, not as good, but I think without pressure, he's been really good. Receivers do not have much separation. Now, that's one I think we all know about. I mean, I could have gotten the next-gen stats and brought up some numbers for you. But yeah, the Giants' receivers in separation terms have not been good at separating this year. It's tough for a quarterback to throw in very tight windows when your receivers are not getting open consistently. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. Jason Garrett was a bad offensive coordinator. I think we all get that. Jason Garrett's offense was confusing at times, a lot of short routes, a lot of curls, and it just gave him more opportunities for interceptions. A lot of balls got tipped up in the air. Evan Engram caused 3 interceptions himself, I believe. So there were a lot of opportunities for mistakes based on Jason Garrett's offense. I do think that Daniel Jones was more well-suited for Pat Shurmur's offense. But as we know, if you listen to a Dave Gettleman interview last year, Daniel Jones was a Pat Shurmur guy. Pat Shurmur's the one that quote unquote discovered him and gave pretty much suggested to Dave Gettleman, you should go and look at this kid. And I guess both of them came to the agreement that Daniel Jones would be their guy. So now when he's not in Pat Shurmur's offense, you don't really see the best version of Daniel Jones because Daniel Jones was drafted to be a quarterback in Pat Shurmur's scheme, in his system. So when you make that change to Jason Garrett, who, yes, he's had good history of good offenses in Dallas, but that was with great names of Des Bryant, Miles Austin, prime Jason Witten, Tony Romo, who I think is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in my lifetime at least. That was a great team, a good offensive line, and sometimes great offensive line as well. So that will make your numbers look better. But Jason Garrett, was basically 31st in offense this year. Was not a good look for his quarterback, so, there is that. He showed upside in year one, although it included many turnovers. So I've made this point before. I will take the quarterback with upside over the overly conservative type quarterback. So, I made this example before, I think, with the entertainer. Would you rather have a quarterback that averages 2.1 turnovers per game, but averages 28.6 points per game on offense, points on the scoreboard? Or would you rather have the quarterback that averages 0.7 turnovers per game, but puts up 19.6 points per game? I know if you turn the ball over, you sometimes put your defense in a really bad spot. Of course, there's a limit on turnovers, but if you're averaging like 1.5 more turnovers per game, but you're putting up almost 10 points more on the scoreboard, I will take the extra turnovers. And Daniel Jones is a guy that, he's not going to just have an Aaron Rodgers type touchdown interception ratio where it's like 45-7. He's going to have years where it was like his rookie year, 25 touchdowns, 12 picks, 24 touchdowns, 13 picks. Like, that's what I feel like he can be around. Now, when you put him in the Jason Garrett offense where it's overly conservative, you're not going to have that, which is the unfortunate part. So I prefer him to take more shots. I think most people do. This overly conservative type offense, it kind of caps your ceiling as an offense, and that's why the Giants were mainly 31st in the NFL this year in offense and total offense. He can roll to his right and make throws pretty accurately when they're there. He doesn't make like these crazy throws like I've seen Justin Herbert do it many times now. I've seen Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson. Like, he does not have a cannon for an arm. And sometimes when you're on the run, I've seen Baker Mayfield do this as well. I love that from Baker Mayfield's game. But when they're rolling and just put a lot of velocity on the ball and get it through a tight window, I've seen Daniel Jones make the simple throws going to his right, which definitely helps. It's not like a guy like Eli Manning or a pocket passer does not do that too often. So when you see a quarterback do it, at least it's part of his game. But I don't really see like a massive ceiling or a high ceiling in terms of Daniel Jones out of the pocket. I don't think he has the arm strength to be this elite out-of-pocket passer. Now, can he make the simple throws? Yes, and that's definitely a positive thing in my opinion at least. I mean, when you're asking to find yourself the next Mahomes and Russell Wilson and Baker Mayfield and those type of guys, it's they don't grow on trees. But I still think Daniel Jones does a good job rolling to his right and making the throws that are there for him. He had one of the toughest schedules for a quarterback in 2020. I think I saw this one on Twitter today or yesterday. I forget who tweeted it. But basically, according to some type of numbers, it was a website or a source that I trusted. It was an account that I trusted. So it basically said Daniel Jones had the toughest schedule for a quarterback this year, which I totally believe because they played tough defenses. I mean, the Rams, the the Buccaneers, the Steelers, like they played many tough defense. Even Washington has a pretty good defense, as we know. So he played some tough defenses throughout the year, as we know. So that is the good for Daniel Jones. Feel free to add more to that. For the bad, durability issues. He's been out. He was out 2 games his rookie year, 2.5 or 3 this year, maybe 2, I forget honestly, but there are some durability issues. I think we know that by now. It's not the biggest thing in the world. He's avoided the big injury, knock on wood, has not torn his ACL or his Achilles or something terrible like that, but he's had some minor injuries that have kept him out of games, of course. He had the collarbone break in college, so it's something to watch out for. I'm not overly concerned, but it kind of makes you appreciate Eli Manning even more. He hasn't clearly improved in year 2. That's like a big thing. Sometimes guys have sophomore slumps. So going back to Baker Mayfield, looked great as a rookie, had a slump in year 2. And yes, a lot of it was contributed to his play call or his offensive line, but you can make the same excuses basically for Daniel Jones. If Daniel Jones comes back and has a year 3 closer to his rookie year, minus the turnovers, then all of a sudden you're dealing with a pretty good quarterback. So I still have faith he can turn it around, but his year 2 was really not that impressive, to be honest with you. I know it's like mainly looking at the numbers, and Jones has had games this year where he's looked good just watching it. The first Steelers game, he looked really good, minus the terrible interception on like the 2-yard line. Baltimore's game recently, the second Eagles game, last game of the year against Dallas. He's had games where he's looked good this year. It just hasn't been consistent yet. So I think we'll get it eventually. It just has to happen more consistently. He has not proven to be clutch yet. So here's, I looked at this stat. I don't know why I looked at it. You guys know I'm a big Josh Rosen guy, right here, Josh Rosen. I saw that Josh Rosen has the same amount of game-winning drives as Daniel Jones, which tells you a lot. I mean, we have to see a more clutch version of Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones had a game-winning drive in his first game ever. So he's had one in his past, I don't know how many starts that would be, but a lot. His other one came in that Washington Chase Young Bowl in Week 16 last year. That was his other game-winning drive. So he hasn't shown us, at least this year, and even some parts last year, to be clutch. He's had games this year many times to come down and either tie the game or win the game. The Rams game, they were down 8 through the interception. The Dallas game, they failed to pick up a first down. Then they lost on the field goal. The Bears game ended in an incomplete pass, I believe. The Buccaneers game was another one where I think that was mostly on Daniel Jones. We all can agree on that one. Trying to think who else, what other games there were. I don't know. He fumbled in that Eagles game where they blew the big lead on Thursday night, but there wasn't much time left, so I won't really hold it against him. But Daniel Jones has not had like this huge clutch moment yet as a Giants quarterback other than his first game, and that's the one we remember, obviously. But hopefully that gets better as time goes on. So next is pocket awareness is not good. That could definitely be worded better because I made this graphic probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, but honestly, ever since that Bengals game, something changed. I don't know if he started playing with like more instincts or what, but like for some reason his pocket awareness and like his maneuvering around the pocket became a lot better. I started him seeing move to the left more. He had that throw rolling to his left against the Ravens that I loved. He seems more comfortable with maneuvering in the pocket. Yes, there's times where I think he should evade the pocket sometimes, and he stands in there too long and kind of goes towards the pressure, which I'm never a fan of. And it's still not perfect. It's still a work in progress. However, I think it is getting better. So I will say it's an improvement. It's still not good, but it's an improvement. So I think we're moving in the right direction there with the pocket awareness. As I said, doesn't maneuver the pocket as well as some other quarterbacks do. You see some quarterbacks that when pressure's on them, they find ways to get out of it like consistently. And I know it's more of like the really athletic types, like the Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson type guys, and Lamar Jackson especially. Like we see guys like that. Josh Allen's very good at it. Can maneuver the pocket very well and kind of like have eyes in the back of their head and have like a good feel for what's going on in the pocket, where the pressure's coming from. Sometimes Daniel Jones is oblivious to it, and that's a problem, and that's kind of why he oftentimes fumbles, especially last year. So that can get better, but as I said, it is moving in the right direction, so it won't be, maybe next season it won't be part of the bad. Maybe next year it actually gets better. We'll see. So arm strength and velocity is not top tier in the league. Now, people have different opinions about velocity, arm strength. How much does it really matter? I think when you look at the top tier elite quarterbacks in this league, you think about, as I keep saying the same guys, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, throw Tom Brady in there, Aaron Rodgers. Like, most of these guys have very elite arm strength. You know, some more than others, of course, but at the same time, like a guy like Drew Brees, for instance, the past few years or so, is a guy that relies on very accurate passes and great anticipation. So you don't have to have great arm strength, but I think to have a high ceiling as a quarterback and be like a top 10 or a superstar type quarterback, it helps a lot to have arm strength. You don't have to have it. And I think Daniel Jones has an average arm. It's not like it's a terrible arm. I think it's maybe slightly below average, but then again, he's had throws where he throws the ball 55, 60 yards, and it's accurate, but we also see many underthrows as well. So, look, I don't think he'll ever have an elite arm. It was not something that stood out to me when I watched him at Duke even, but it is what it is. It's not an arm that's going to be like, it's not an arm that's so bad to the point where you cannot succeed with it in the NFL. I think there's room for that to get better, of course, and we've seen players get better arm strength as their career goes on. I think Tom Brady's a good example of that as well. So it could get better, of course, and I think as he puts on more muscle like he did last year, that could improve, of course, but it's evident that Daniel Jones was not blessed with like this cannon of an arm that some other elite quarterbacks in the league have. But as I said, you can win with that, but you know, I just wish it was a little better. So it's not really completely fixable, but it can improve a little bit. So he has not been consistent. Yes, that is definitely a true thing. We've seen times where Jones has had games where he's looked awful, games where he's looked great, and a lot of in between. So we have not seen really him play at a consistent level for majority parts of the year. Now, it is nice that we left off the 2020 season on a good note and it's moving in the right direction, but we've seen many times this year where it's like, you know, he'll have the no-turnover game and throw a touchdown and look like a pretty competent quarterback. And then he'll have a week where it's 2 fumbles, an interception, and just looking like we're reverting back to where we were before. So it has to be more consistent. I think we all can agree on that, but it has looked better the past 3 games or so, 3 or 4 games he's played in. Questionable decision-making. I mean, yes, it is, you know, as I said, you can blame Evan Engram for some of the interceptions this year, but some of his throws this year came in situations where it didn't need to happen. And I think about that Steelers one, of course, on the goal line. That was a bad decision. That Rams one where he basically could have ran for the first down but decided to make that throw on the run that was intercepted. That's a bad decision. So he's had bad decisions. I think we know that. The 2 interceptions against the Buccaneers, awful interceptions. Like, I think we know by now Daniel Jones sometimes doesn't make the best decisions, but we had a quarterback named Eli Manning who didn't make the best decisions sometimes, and he still won us 2 Super Bowls. So it's not like a must, but you sometimes have to be a bit smarter with the ball and not kind of force things when it's not there. So it is something, once again, that's fixable. He has shown a tendency to stare down one receiver. I think people have noticed this. I see it in my comments on the film review videos I do. I don't really point it out too much because oftentimes when he's staring down one guy, I feel like it doesn't get him in trouble too much, but we've also seen the times where it's one of those curl routes and he'll stare down the guy, a defender sees it, jumps the route, ball pops up in the air, and it's intercepted. So that's when it gets you in trouble. And, you know, sometimes the safety will notice it, and, you know, I guess every quarterback is going to have plays where you stare down one receiver because you're hoping your first read is open. But when Daniel Jones locks in on that first read for too long, it's like sometimes he has to get off it a little. You know, he stays on the same read for too long is what I'm trying to say. So if he can get better at that and getting through the progressions, it's something that the more he plays, the better he'll get at it. So once again, it's not the most concerning thing, but there are times where it's not the best and it could be better, so I will say that. He has not been good in the red zone in 2020. That was something in 2019's rookie season where he was really good in the red zone. I forget his numbers off the top of my head, but it was definitely more efficient and a lot better. This year, it's been more interceptions, more turnovers, and obviously not being efficient because the Giants had a lot of trouble putting up touchdowns this year and putting up points on the scoreboard. So obviously as a red zone quarterback, whether it was him or Jason Garrett, they just were not the same as they were the year before. So that kind of took a step back this year, unfortunately. I think he's a low ceiling prospect. Now, when I say that, when you say someone has a low ceiling, it doesn't mean they're a bust. I mean, when you're saying low ceiling, you're basically saying this guy doesn't have the physical tools to ever be an amazing superstar quarterback. Like a guy like Josh Allen, I know I go back to him, but when I watched him at Wyoming, you said this is a guy with a super high ceiling because he's 6'5", he's very elusive, athletic, he's strong as hell, can throw the ball 80 yards. That's a guy who had crazy upside and a crazy ceiling. Same thing with Justin Herbert. He wasn't used the right way at Oregon, but he has that body type, has the arm, can make great throws in the run, throws with great velocity. That's a guy with a very high ceiling. When I see Daniel Jones, I think of a guy that if he played in the right system, he can be a successful quarterback. I've always said that about him. So he doesn't really come off as a top 5 quarterback going forward type of prospect. He could be top 10. I feel like that's still a lot to ask for. I think Daniel Jones, when he finally settles into the NFL, will be a league average quarterback. Now, you can win with that. It's harder. You'd obviously rather have an elite quarterback, which is like my problem. But at the same time, if you build the right team around him, you can win with that. So I don't think he projects as this top 10 quarterback going forward. I really hope I'm wrong about that, but from what I've seen so far, and as I say, I'm a guy that watches Red Zone all the time. I watch all the primetime games. I have a good understanding of what other NFL teams look like. There's a lot of great quarterback play around the league, and I see guys that do crazy stuff every week and make plays that make you say, wow, like 3 to 5 times a game. You don't see too much of that from Jones. Jones is going to play within the system. Jones has had plays before where it's been very impressive. I remember last year, the rookie season against Washington, it looked like he was completely dead in the pocket, got out of it somehow, ran for a first down. He's had plays like that where it looks like he makes something out of nothing. It doesn't happen too often, and I wish it happened more. But as I said, if you play as a system, I don't want to say system quarterback because that has like a bad tone to it and people don't like that, but I think if you're a good system quarterback, you can win with that. And I've always made Daniel Jones can be the Kansas City version of Alex Smith, and Alex Smith during that time was a pretty good quarterback. He wasn't elite, he never was, but at the same time, Alex Smith was throwing for 3,800 yards to 4,000 and throwing for a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. Had some pretty good rushing numbers, a good completion percentage, and when they put a good team around them, the Chiefs were winning 10, 11, 12 games per year. They never got to the Super Bowl during the Alex Smith era, but they proved to be a good team that was making the playoffs every year. So if Daniel Jones had a little more playoff success compared to Alex Smith, then maybe the Giants find themselves in a Super Bowl. We'll find out, but I don't think it should come off as like I'm knocking the guy. I think, being a system quarterback's fine. You just got to be in the right system. And the problem is I don't know if Jason Garrett's the right system, but I don't know. It really depends if they bring him back or not, because right now, as you sit here on January 7th, he has the interview with the Chargers. We'll find out what happens. I'm hoping he gets that job. I'd feel bad for Justin Herbert, though, honestly. But I hope he gets that job, and I want the Giants to move on and get an offensive coordinator that fits Daniel Jones' skill set and is kind of a more modern play caller. But at the same time, I mean, if he's in year 2 of the same system, maybe that helps him as well. But I'd rather have a better system than Jason Garrett, so we'll see how they go about that. And I kind of alluded to this one before. They need a perfect team around him to win a Super Bowl. So once again, not trying to knock the guy. I think it's just me trying to be realistic. I'm not going to lie to you guys and feed you this overly optimistic type, fandom nonsense. Like, I think, honestly, to win a Super Bowl with a Daniel Jones type quarterback, you have to have a very good team around him. And, in 2007, Eli Manning was more of the same thing. In 2011, Eli Manning did a lot of the carrying himself. But, back in 2007, Eli was kind of a guy that was just, of course, he played out of his mind in the playoffs, but for a majority of the year, leaned on the run game, leaned on a great pass rush, and leaned on a good defense. If Daniel Jones can do that and just not make the mistakes to kill the Giants, then I think they can have some seasons where they win 10 or 11 games. Now, my problem is, and I'll get to this in the conclusion in a little bit, I don't want to be that team that constantly wins 7, 8, 9 games, makes the playoffs every other year, and kind of just keeps falling in that same pattern where Daniel Jones is not bad enough to move off from, but not good enough to get you to the promised land and get you deep into the playoffs, to the conference championship or to the Super Bowl, even the second round, divisional round. I don't want to be in a situation where the Nets are, if you're a basketball fan, the Atlanta Hawks were like this for a long time, where like they had that team of like Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, and like Marvin Williams. They like made the playoffs every year in the early 2010s and got out in the first or second round every year. There's probably other NBA teams that do the same thing because a lot of NBA teams make the playoffs. I don't want to be that team. I mean, making the playoffs is great, but when you get out in the first round constantly, it's like, what are we doing here? Do we have a ceiling? Can we exceed this? And you kind of get to that point. So that's more down the line. It could happen in a few years, and I hope I'm wrong, but I don't want that to be the maximum, the maximum potential for the Giants going forward. I don't want that to be a one-and-done playoff exit type of team, a team that wins 8 games one year, 9 the next year. Maybe they get 10 once in a while, but for the most part, you have to have a team eventually that's able to get over the hump and get to that conference championship or Super Bowl. You cannot settle for just making the playoffs, although it's nice. We play for championships, of course. At least I'd hope so. So anyway, conclusion, we should all hope and want Jones to greatly improve in year 3 because that benefits the Giants the most. I think, we all can agree on that. On the other hand, if Jones does not show clear and obvious improvement in year 3, then it's time to find the next guy. As I say, I've said this in the past on Twitter before, I think. The worst thing an NFL franchise can do with a young quarterback is keep him around for too long. There's not many times where a team will move off a quarterback too soon and it completely bites them in the ass. The most recent and obvious one is Ryan Tannehill. And a lot of that's probably Adam Gase and the surroundings there on Miami. Miami's teams weren't awful, but Adam Gase is awful. So other than Ryan Tannehill, though, what examples have we seen of teams moving off of young quarterbacks where it's completely came back to bite them? Like, you don't think of too many of them, right? Like, at least to me, not many come to mind. So I think the worst thing a team can do is keep a young quarterback who's not the answer for too long. I think if Daniel Jones doesn't show significant improvement in year 3 and doesn't make the playoffs, although it's not really his individual fault, it depends how good the team is. But if Daniel Jones as an individual does not play well in year 3, I think it's time to move on, and we'll see exactly how he plays next year because, of course, there's context to be put into everything, so we'll find out. But if he's not showing improvement in year 3, then it's going to be like, what are we doing here? Like, at that point, I feel like they would be able to move on and not regret it going forward. There might be better quarterbacks in the draft next year. It's all hypothetical, but, it's something to talk about, of course. All right, so there's nothing worse than, as I said, hanging on to a low-ceiling quarterback and hoping for one magical run with the perfect team around him. Think about the Cincinnati Bengals with Andy Dalton. They had him from, 2010 maybe to 2019. They had some playoff runs here and there, but the Bengals really never went to, I don't even think they made it to the divisional round at any point. That might have been the furthest they went. You don't want to be the Washington football team or the Minnesota Vikings with Kirk Cousins. I know the Vikings won a playoff game last year, which was nice, but they got killed in the next round against the Niners. So that's a team you don't want to have Daniel Jones turn into Andy Dalton on Cincinnati or Kirk Cousins or someone like that. You want to have a guy who can bring you to the Super Bowl. That's what you want from a quarterback. And a lot of it depends on who you put around him. At the same time, you need a quarterback that's capable of getting you there at the same time. Hopefully with a new and improved play caller, that's a we'll see, as well as improved weapons around him, we see the best version of Daniel Jones in 2021. So yes, a lot of it depends on who's calling the plays, who's his receivers. Do the Giants fall in a spot where they can pick up a Devontae Smith? I feel like Jamar Chase would be gone. Maybe a Jalen Waddle. We'll find out what happens in the first round. Of course, Kyle Pitts is an option at tight end who I'm a pretty big fan of. I watched a bit of him last week. He's really impressive, but I don't know if the Giants would go that route. But anyway, yes, we'll see what they do for him in the offseason. I personally think it'd be best for Daniel Jones' future to move off of Jason Garrett. I know people don't want to hear, 3 different play callers in 3 years. We need continuity, but sometimes continuity is not a good thing. When you're continuously doing something with something that's not working, it's not continuity at this point. At that point, it's just stupidity. You know what I mean? When it's not working, at what point does it become stupidity and not continuity? If Jason Garrett, let's say Jason Garrett comes back next year and the Giants have the 30th, 29th or something ranked offense, that's stupidity. You have to expect Jason Garrett to come back next year, hopefully with a healthy Saquon Barkley, hopefully an improved wide receiver 1, obviously, and some other weapons possibly, and expect things to get better, and Daniel Jones himself getting better in year 3 in the offensive line. But if the offense sucks again next year and it's Jason Garrett at the helm calling plays, it's going to be a bad look. I'm not going to lie. So I don't know. We'll find out who's calling plays and all those type of things. That's pretty important. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, what do I expect from Daniel Jones in year 3? I think a lot. If it depends. If there's an Allen Robinson here next year and a different play caller, I would feel pretty good about him. If it's the same stuff, not really a wide receiver 1, Jason Garrett's still here and whatnot, I don't know how to feel about it. So it depends exactly what happens. But I think Daniel Jones, as I've said, has a chance to be an average quarterback in this league. He can turn into a Kirk Cousins. He can turn into an Alex Smith on KC. He can turn into an Andy Dalton, which is fine. You'd rather have a better quarterback, but we already took him. He's here. And I hope he finds a way to prove me wrong and many other people wrong and kind of outproduce my future projection for him. Because as I said, I can be wrong about this. It's just going off my eyes watching him. So we'll see what he does in the future, and I hope he turns into a star quarterback. But I guess it depends who they put around him, of course. So anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you expect from Daniel Jones in year 3. What was your takeaways from him after year 2? I know there was a lot of great reactions after year 1. What were your reactions after year 2? Was it a disappointment? Do you blame Jason Garrett? Do you blame the receivers? Will he bounce back in year 3? And things like that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you next time.